Everyone, it's so good to see you guys. It's the month like blew by, but I also feel like it's been so long for some reason. It's just kind of this weird world. But it's so good to see your faces and thanks for being here for February's Kidmin training. Today we have Leah with us. She has been here before, so I think most of you probably have seen her before and know her, um, at least online. And I'm so grateful for her. She and her leadership. She works at the national office, um, overseeing the children's disciple making department, this children's ministry department.
The title gets strangely long. I just say Alliance Kids.
Alliance Kids, love it. We'll simplify it. So, yeah, such a blessing to have her here. She's going to be talking to us about reopening, which I know we've had some conversations about, but we've never had anyone like give us their wisdom. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. But we'll also be hitting, talking about like the slower reopening where you include kids in services and what that could look like. So we'll kind of do a broader one and we'll leave time at the end for you guys to ask some questions because I'm sure you have them. And Bobby Joe is here with us who has already opened up kids ministry and she may be able to give us some stuff as well. So yeah, Leah, I'll go ahead and pass this off to you.
Well, thanks so much for having me. Is
Yeah.
Bobby Joe the only one that's opened so far? Anybody else? A little bit?
Arbor
Okay.
Heights a little bit.
We have
Okay.
elementary and preschool available. We haven't opened anything in the nursery for little babies, but we do have, in fact, we're having to open another classroom for preschool. So that'll be the third room. And then we're using our fellowship hall with family tables for our elementary kids.
Great. So I'll just start by saying that I'm going to give you just some broad guidelines that hopefully will um, get the ball rolling. I'm sure the ball is already rolling. Everyone's always thinking about what's next. How do we do this? And every church is unique. There is definitely not a one size fits all that I can give you that you can run with and say, I can do this perfectly, exactly the way this is in our church. That's just unrealistic. Everybody's environments look different. Everybody's senior pastor looks different. What's being asked of you looks different. It's just going to be different from church to church. So I'm just going to give you some what I would call guiding principles to help navigate as you're re-entering or trying to reintegrate, or you're even opening maybe even smaller and you're just welcoming families back into the building in general, and you're not actually doing full-on children's ministry. So this is sort of a multi-faceted training in a sense, really designed to help you identify some areas or to ask good questions as you go forward. And this is not easy, and it's not a perfect. There's not there's never going to be a perfect way to do this, but I do want to encourage you to do what you can when you can, as much as you can, because we really do need to get our kids and families back in and a part of the greater church as safely and as quickly as we can. But I'm going to open us up in prayer really quickly, and then we'll jump in, if that's okay. You'll pray with me. Lord, I thank you so much for this Zoom room full of leaders in your church. And I just pray that as each one of them is leaning into the children and families in their churches, that you would give them your divine wisdom and resources to do this well so that they can be your hands and feet for their community. We just pray your blessings over their ministries and their teams and their families. And we thank you that the local church is still your bride, and it's still what you love and cherish so much, and that you invite us to be a part of that. So we give this time to you, and it's in your name we pray. Amen. Okay. So I'm going to give you 5 keywords. I didn't put together like a slide or anything because I'm going to say these words over and over. If this is something that you want to jot down, go for it. I will revisit each one of them probably more than once. I'm a words person, so I like to make myself little systems or acronyms or whatever to help me think through when I'm planning and doing processes. So these are the words that I want us to talk about today. The first one is evaluate, then innovate, calculate, communicate, and integrate. So I'll say that one more time, and then we're kind of going to break those down a little bit. So evaluate, innovate, calculate, communicate, and integrate. So let's start at the top, which is evaluate, which I'm sure all of you are already doing. But that's where you take a step back and you look at your ministry as a whole, and you start to open the dialogue, particularly with your senior leadership at your church, because it's really important for everyone to understand what it is exactly that you're trying to achieve. Some pastors are going to say, hey, I want children's ministry up and running day one, full-fledged. Some are going to be like, that's not what I want. I don't think our families are going to do that or whatever. But you want to take a moment to think about what it is that you're wanting to do, what the expectations are all around the table. Maybe it includes your elder board, whatever it is, whoever's making the decisions. You want to evaluate and ask really good questions of what are the expectations? What are we hoping for as we venture into reopening, or as we are asking families to come back into the building, even if we're just asking them into the main church service? One of the things that I think is really important about evaluate is to look at 2 different things: the hope for the present and future, and evaluate where you were in the past. This season is really unique because it gives you the opportunity to make some changes that maybe you've secretly wanted to make for a really long time, or maybe there are things that you've just been doing out of habit or routine way back a year ago when things were normal, that you've always kind of secretly thought, gee, I don't even like doing this in our ministry, or this is just something that we've done because it's always been done. This is a season where you can make some big changes that might really need to happen. I keep having this conversation with district superintendents and pastors in general, also with children's ministry leaders, but particularly with senior pastors and district superintendents, this realization that sometimes what we've been doing forever, especially when it comes to children's ministry or welcoming families into our churches, may need to change. And this season has provided that opportunity. So when you're evaluating, I want you to think about that. Pick apart the things that you absolutely loved about your ministry in the past and the parts that just made you cringe every week. And maybe, because we all know we have those. I know for me, it was, there's different things like, how am I communicating, or what am I expecting out of my volunteers? Just different things that you want to take some time to really think through. An exciting thing about this is we have an opportunity to really connect children with the greater church body right now, more than we ever have had potentially in a long, well, I shouldn't say ever, but in a long time. A lot of our churches across the Alliance have their children's ministry is so separate from what's happening in the main church that sometimes kids never ever trickle in to the main sanctuary to be a part of church. And this is a season where we can change that narrative a little bit. And I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing for our kids to feel a part of the broader church. So step 1, evaluate. That includes looking at your teams of volunteers. One of the things I'm hearing over and over and over is, we want to open children's ministry, but I don't have enough volunteers. Nobody wants to come back. Anybody started to hear that yet, or you're facing that? Yeah. So that can be a real problem, especially if you have a large children's ministry, or really, it doesn't matter the size. If you don't have enough people to man the station, so to speak, it can be really, really complicated to figure out how you're going to step into that. This is where having that dialogue with your senior leadership is really important too, because they may have really grand expectations that you want to try to meet, but you need to also keep bringing them into the conversation that it takes people to meet those expectations. And it might be that you have to readjust yours or theirs just simply because you may not have the team that you used to have. A lot of people don't. A lot of children's ministry leaders are saying, my people aren't coming, or I have 10 out of the 30. How are we supposed to do this? One, I don't know if this is a positive or a negative or a helpful, whatever the case may be, but one thing that I've seen happen over and over is as we reopen, you're not going to get 100% of your kids back on the first Sunday. So there is a little bit of, I don't have to plan for hundreds and hundreds of children like I might have on any given Sunday, or whatever the size of your ministry is, but you do want to think about your team. So evaluate your situation. What does it look like? How many people do you think you need to open your doors, to open your ministry? And sometimes that's a hard question to answer if you're not asking families, if you're not reaching out to your parents and saying, hey, we're looking at reopening our children's ministry. We're going to send this quick survey. When I say quick, it needs to be like 3 questions, 5 at the most, to help us plan to serve your family. Are you planning on coming back? Yes, no. What service or what event, whatever it is that you're trying to reopen, poll your folks as best you can so that you can get an idea of really who's out there that's going to come back right away, so you can start to build your team. So that's the step 1 of evaluate. Then if we move into innovate, this is where you get to be creative. So let's lean into the I have more kids than I have volunteers problem, which seems to be a nationwide Alliance kids issue. We want to have our kids back, but we don't have enough teams or enough volunteers to do this the way we've always done it. So this is where obviously you innovate. Do not fall victim to your curriculum. Do not think that your curriculum has to write the story for whatever it is that you're doing. If you're used to following a certain system of we have this many classrooms and we have this many teachers and we have this large group space, I'm going to tell you right now, unless you're just really fortunate, you're probably going to have to recreate a little bit here and reimagine what ministry looks like to kids in this season, especially if you are being held to certain restrictions on space and children ratios. I'm not sure what your state is doing. Every state is different. Every church holds that differently. Some churches are very much following the guidelines of their local government. Some are not, because it's not, they're exempt because they're a church. But if you're in a situation where you have to have a room that's so big to, house all your children, that's going to tell a different story for what it looks like for how you do children's ministry. You're going to think about things like, how do we do a large group teaching or spend more time in a large group setting? What does it look like to do small group if we can't really go into small groups? Can we do pods in these big rooms and have some noisy discussion between our, age divided areas? But you want to get creative here and ask other people on your team that might have bigger ideas than you and say, hey, if we have to keep all of our kids in this one spot for this amount of time, and we're not going to change locations, or we can't put kids in all the places that we used to, how does it look for us to minister to these kids on a Sunday morning? The truth is, the more that you can do in a large group setting, the easier it's going to be for you, especially as you're rebuilding a team and especially if you don't have a huge team. Um, you know, spending a little bit longer with worship with the kids, even if you're just doing worship videos where they just do motions and sing along, or even if they're masked, you can still do some worship videos if you can't do live singing. Spending some time where you can do things more as a group, so you're not stretching yourself as thin as you would be if you were trying to manage all the areas that you have. Now that's a little easier when you're talking elementary. When you're talking preschool and babies, we all know that that gets a lot more complicated. What you can do with a room of 0 to 5 year olds is a little different than what you can do with kindergarten through 5th or 6th grade, especially school age children. If they have ever been to school, I don't know if you guys are back in school yet or not, but if they are, they're already used to these environments where they have to do things a little bit differently. Babies and preschoolers, that's a different story. So when you're innovating your preschool, you want to bring your team together and say, how comfortable are we with doing XYZ with our kids? What are we going to say that we're offering in our nursery, in our preschool? Are we offering diapering, or are we calling the parents in the service to do that? Are we having a limit on how many children can be a part of our nursery or our preschool? If that's something that you need to do, how do parents know about that? Can they sign up for a spot? How are we communicating what we're offering to our parents of our tiniest in the building? So evaluate, look at your needs, talk to your senior leadership about what their expectations are, then start to innovate whatever it is that you're going to do to create these systems. Then we're going to lean into calculate. So this is where the nitty gritty of numbers and spacing and protocol, whatever it is that is going to be involved in opening your space. This is where you need to find out, what am I being held accountable for, as far as, maybe, I don't know if you have multiple services, if you're opening for more than one service. Are you going to, how big is the team that you're going to need? Who's going to clean in between teams? What are we saying that we're cleaning? Do we have the equipment, the hand sanitizers, the paper towels, the things that we need? So you want to really start making a list of what it is that you might need to get yourself through a Sunday morning, or whatever it is that you're opening. Maybe you're going to start with a midweek program. You're still going to want to sit down and catalog what it's going to take, including what it's going to take to get your team ready to do this, your volunteer team. They're going to need to know what they're responsible for. And we say this a lot, clarity is kindness. And I repeat that over and over: clarity to your volunteer leaders, clarity to your parents, to your leadership. Clarity is kindness. So as you're reopening, the more you can be clear about what's happening to everyone involved, the better off you'll be, which leads us directly into the next one, which is communicate. So we talked a lot about communicating with leadership. We've talked a little bit about communicating with parents, but let's talk for a minute about communicating with your volunteers, because those are the people that's really going to help you make this happen. I really run by the rule that you can never, ever, ever over communicate, but you don't want to barrage your people with too much information. Nobody's got the time or the space to read 3-page long emails from you for their volunteer serving for an hour once a week. So when you think about what it is that you're wanting to communicate to your volunteers, I always tell folks, write it all out first. Don't send it. Write it all out first. And look at what you've got. Is it realistic that someone's going to read all those things? And how can you take what you have and condense it down? I had an assistant one time that did a fabulous job of being very detailed in what she wrote, but it was just volumes. And I shared with her one time, and whether this seems positive or negative, I just think it's reality, and it's helpful for us to remember the reality of working with volunteers, which is this: there will be people on your great, well-intentioned people on your volunteer team that's gonna probably read whatever email you sent in the parking lot before they walk in to serve in your ministry. Or they may walk into church, run into the bathroom, and read your email. If you've written volumes, that's never gonna land on them. So I like to do things like create a classroom binder or folder that's got colored sheets of paper with really big font with bullet points that says, in the first 20 minutes of your time in here, do these 3 things. In the second 20 minutes, however you want, however you break down your time, but something visual and that's not only been sent to them in an email or in a phone call or posted on social media, whatever it is. It's also, you also need something physical in the space that they're volunteering in that's so quick they can see it and do it instantly. Like if you've made the decision that you're not diapering babies in preschool, you need something that says, call parents for diaper change. Nobody is to take a child to the bathroom. Whatever it is that you're implementing, it needs to be visual, it needs to be quick. And not only that, your volunteers need to know where to find that information. I recommend, if you have a steady team of people that do this over and over, even if they serve only a couple times a month, I recommend creating, like I said, a folder or a binder that's theirs to keep, and then replicating one for each classroom that you're clear about. Hey, this stays in the classroom. This isn't yours to take home, but you have one with your name on it that you can take home that repeats the same information over and over and over. But it gives them ownership of that space and ownership of the part of the ministry that they're taking, that they're taking on. That lays out what's their responsibilities. What are they saying that they're going to do while they're with kids, when they're finished with kids, or before they get there, those kind of things. So that's the whole communicate. Clarity is kindness when it comes to talking with your volunteers. But let's take it a step further in how are we going to communicate those things to our parents. Same thing. You want to be nice. Oh, I'm getting an unstable connection. Can you all hear me? Have I lost
It's
you?
a little choppy. It's a little choppy, but it's not horrible. But
Anybody
maybe I'll
out
get
there?
there. I don't know. Ooh, maybe it is
Not too bad.
horrible.
Okay.
Are you there? Am I here? Okay.
You're there.
You were, everything was so good.
I hear you. Can you hear me, Hannah?
Kinda. You're cutting in and out, but maybe if you just keep talking. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
I
keep
don't hear
going.
you. Okay, good.
Sometimes
Okay.
turning off the video can help.
If I freeze, okay, I will do that. I'll turn off the video. How's that? Can you guys hear me now? Thumbs up?
Yep.
That helps me. Okay, great. All right, wonderful. So we were going to talk about communicating with our parents. And one key thing that I would tell you to do is if you haven't already done this, start training your parents of the one spot, maybe the two places that they get information from you. One problem that I find is we're in a bad habit of being so accommodating to folks that we run ourselves ragged communicating and recommunicating in 45 different places. And we really need to teach our people, hey, if you want to find out about what's going on at church and children's ministry, this is the place to get the information. This is a season where you can really hone that in. I have been in that spot where I've had people want to message me on Facebook. They want to send me texts. I've even gotten Twitter stuff. I've gotten it from every direction. And I think, oh, how can I answer this same question 47 different ways? One of the things that I would say is tell people where it is that you're communicating from. And then when they reach out to you in another place, you might want to kindly say something like, I got your message. Please refer to this link or refer to this email. If they continue to reach out to you, you might want to have a conversation and say, I'm sorry, I don't respond on that platform. This is where we communicate, until you begin to really create a central hub for people to know where they get their information. I also think it's really wise, especially as you're reopening, to put that up in visible places also in your church. For instance, if you have a check-in kiosk or you have classroom doors where you can post a little poster, or not a poster, but a colorful sheet of paper that says very simply, check our Facebook page for the most updated children's ministry information. Literally one sentence. Don't go beyond that. Something that a parent can read while wrangling their toddler and their fourth grader and they're trying to get into church. But you want to communicate what parents can expect when they do start to enter. Are you requiring masks for the kids? At what age are those required? Are you requiring social distancing? What does that look like? You want to create your policy, make it as possible, and put it in the hands of your parents, and continue to put it in the hands of your parents until it's so old news that everybody knows what it is that you're doing. It doesn't mind. No one cares if it gets published 47 times. They'll start not looking at it after a while, and that's okay, especially when you're just reopening. But you want to communicate exactly what it is that a family can experience when they come into your ministry. So then the last part is our integrate. This is where you go live and you make it happen. And hopefully you have a great launch. You may not. You may walk away that Sunday or Wednesday or whatever day it is and go, oh my goodness, that was just crazy. And that's okay. But what you want to do is go back through the steps. If you had a successful day, then you want to say, okay, let's evaluate what made that work. Is there anything that we need to do to make it better? Are there supplies or things that we need that we didn't have? How was our communication? You can always gauge that really well by how smooth the morning goes. If you're not being asked the same 1,000 questions from parents or volunteers, then you know that you've communicated well. If you get a lot of recurring questions from people that you know should have known what was taking place, then that is a good indicator that your communication needs to be stepped up a little bit. But I also want to really encourage you to just keep, as much as you can, your senior pastor or your senior leadership team in on the dialogue. You need to let them know how it's going, where your needs are, and how they can help you. Because if you're really short on volunteers, you're going to need them to say that from the platform. You're going to need them to advocate in front of the audience for you on your behalf, to say, we want to bring your families back, your children back, but we have to have a team to do that. So hopefully you have a really good working relationship with your leadership, but don't be afraid to be honest. Obviously, you want to be upbeat and excited about what's happening, but do be honest and let them be in on that. So those are just some real general things to think through. One question that I get often is, what kind of rules should we go by? How do we know what to do? And I can't speak for your area, but I can say that if you are opening your doors and your local school systems are open, sometimes reading their websites or making a phone call to the local elementary school and say, how are you opened kindergarten? What is it that you expect, will really help you in making some decisions for what kind of rules that you want to follow in your particular location. Now, there's going to be people on all sides that are going to have 1,000 different opinions about what this should look like. And that's really hard. I'll just tell you, that's really hard. You're going to have some people that think you should not be open. You're going to have some people think that your children should show up in hazmat suits. You're going to have some people that are like, what is everybody so afraid of? We are fine. We don't need masks, whatever the case. And I want to encourage you to know that it's not your responsibility to convince people of whatever policy your leaders have set in place for you. It's not your responsibility to convince them. It's simply your responsibility to lay out that policy and explain why that choice was made for your church. And if they have questions or pushback, invite them into a dialogue also with your leadership, so that you're not always feeling like you are trying to convince people that what you've done is the right thing to do. Because chances are some of those decisions were made, either you were all for them or maybe you were for some of them, who knows. But don't take on that burden of feeling like you have to convince everybody that the policies that are in place are the right ones. They're just policies where you're trying to honor the most people that you can in a given space that's most honoring to the broad body of believers. And it doesn't necessarily represent you 100%, but it represents what you've been asked to do as in your part at your church. So that's sort of just some guiding principles. Does anybody have any questions on that? I'm going to try to turn my camera back on while you all are thinking. This helps me.
Leah, I have a question about what you were saying of training parents of where to find the information. In your experience, have you done more like push into inboxes, like subscribe from, or do you rely more heavily like on updating a church website that they just know I can go here to find it?
I've done it every direction. I think what I would recommend first is looking at how your church as a whole communicates. If your church website tends to be the hub of where everybody gets their information, then that's what you want to lean into. If it's a church Facebook page that everybody goes to get their information, then that's what you want to lean into. Sometimes you might need to lean into two areas. I wouldn't go beyond 2 or 3, to be honest with you.
Okay.
One thing that we used an email service like MailChimp for a while. We've used, oh gosh, I can't even think of the names of them. 2 or 3 different church community builder, the software.
Yep.
One of the nice things about email services like that, certain features are you can actually see who opens the email. And if you've not taken the time to look at those stats, I encourage you, do that. If you don't know how to do it, find somebody that can help you. I mean, it's like a click. You go in and it shows, oh, this was delivered to 500 people. If it was delivered to 500 people and 12 people opened it, That's not
Yeah.
how you want to communicate. But if you are delivering this to 500 people and 400 people are opening it, then that is a real good indicator that, hey, this is actually working. Email is probably the easiest to convey larger pieces of information.
Mhm.
And you may want to work on that while also posting on a website or on a social media account. I did that several years back because I wanted to start training my parents to open those emails and to read those emails, because sometimes it's really difficult to convey what you're trying to convey specifically to a parent audience if you're just posting something general on a website. So in everything that I did, children's ministry related, anytime I had print materials, anytime I had put signage up at kiosks or whatever I was doing, I always said, this information will be emailed or has been emailed. Check your spam folders. And then when I would do programs like Awana or anything like that, I would make a parent handbook. It really wasn't a book. It was more like a 2 or 3 page thing to help parents understand what it was for their kids to be a part of it. I would put in there, I communicate our Awana calendar, our Awana whatever, through this email service. And I had a line that where they signed that said, I understand, this is what we're doing. Now, it wasn't flawless, but it did start training people to realize that I'm going to send an email to you every so often. But you do have to be careful. You got to be concise with those emails. Don't send them pages and pages, and don't email 10 times a week, because people will tune you out. But if families know, hey, I get an email from her every Thursday afternoon, and it's always got important things in it, then they'll start to pay notice, because that's what their school does for their kids. And that's how we communicate. I mean, I get 9 bazillion emails from my kids in school. I know which ones to tune out and which ones I really need to pay attention to. And your parents are just the same. They're going to do the same thing.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Any other things I can answer? Okay, well, I'm going to jump into the other topic that we had, which is maybe you're not opening a full children's ministry. Maybe you're not opening children's ministry at all. Maybe your church isn't even opening for a while. How do you make kids feel a part of the greater church body? And what I want to share here, I think, should be applicable to in-person, or if you're still streaming, or if you're going to do streaming and in-person for a while. And it kind of flows through those same things. You can take those same 5 keywords and kind of work through a plan. Think about what it looks like for kids to be a part of the greater church service. How can we be creative, evaluate, innovate? What do you need to do these things? How do you communicate, and how do you make it happen? So here's the thing that I actually want to encourage you on this is for the most part, I'm hearing a real positive response of people, parents, and leaders excited about having children more actively a part of the greater congregation, even if it's for a full Sunday morning, which I'll tell you, I'm an advocate for. I'm also an advocate for children's ministry, obviously, and I believe in age-appropriate discipleship, but I think that there is something uniquely special about children feeling integrated into their church as a whole and not always isolated, only with their peers. So I think where I would like to begin on that is talk to your pastor first. And some pastors are really comfortable with having kids in their audience, and some pastors are not. They don't do well with interruptions or crying babies or whatever the case may be. but you are the advocate for the kids in your church. And most pastors know that they should be comfortable with that, and they might just need your love and encouragement and your voice to say, hey, this is really important. And you can throw this stat out there if you need to. And that is, I think I'm remembering correctly, a little over 60% of families choose and stay a part of a church based on what is done for their children. And that's huge. And if you're not able to open your children's ministry, and the only option is for kids to be a part of the greater service, then you don't want to alienate all these families if there's not even a conversation or a thought or a strategic plan for how do we make kids feel welcomed and a part of this environment. So have a conversation with your pastor. One real easy thing to do, even if you're streaming, is just having a presence on the platform. Somebody that the kids are used to seeing and knowing should show up either on their live stream or even a Sunday morning. So that means maybe one of you would welcome families from the front, or do an opening prayer, something where kids can go, oh, that's Miss Hannah, I know Hannah, or Bobby Joe, whoever it is that they're used to seeing, and they can immediately feel connected because their person or people is up there on the stage. You might need to also talk to your pastor a little bit about service times. My good friend and my last senior pastor that I worked for, he would never preach for less than 55 minutes, which is a long time for little children to try to sit through. And when we started into this phase of, bringing families in, I still do, I still attend that church. I often say to him, remember your whole audience. And quite frankly, if you're talking for an hour or more, you're not losing just kids, you're probably losing a lot of people. So in this season where we're inviting whole families, they need to know that. And it's okay to say that. You can say it in a loving, sweet, kind way, but say, hey, we're all learning how to do things differently. So let's learn this too, or whatever language that you need to say to kind of at least get that idea started. I jokingly, before COVID was a thing, and I had a really good relationship with my senior pastor, but I told him, hey, Rob, anytime you start to go beyond the 55-minute mark, I'm just going to start bringing in my preschool classes, and we're going to sit on the front row one by one until we wrap it up. And it was our ongoing joke, because when you've got preschoolers in your preschool classrooms at 12:30, 12:45 on the end, it's all falling apart at that point. So have those conversations. Have a presence on the platform. It may not even have to be you. Maybe it's another volunteer. Have a plethora of people that would be willing to step up and say, I'll represent our ministry. And it doesn't even have to be grand. Literally a prayer, a scripture reading, something, just so kids can say, hey, I know that person. One thing that I have heard that a lot of folks are doing that work really well is having like a kids pack when they come into church. It might just be some crayons and paper. If you can somehow work with your senior pastor to get sermon notes, and you are able to take those and make them applicable to a kid, that's really helpful. Obviously, it's not going to hit every kid that you have. Not every kid's going to be able to do it, but simple things like Pastor Joe is going to ask you to find the book of Luke this morning. Can you tell me what page Luke was in your Bible? Little things that keep kids involved and listening to what is taking place. Another thing is talk to your worship team. Ask if you could have one kid's song a part of your Sunday morning worship. I mean, that's even if it's just one's plenty. Or say, can we do a song and maybe have one of our children's ministry do like motions during that song? Kids love to worship. They really, really do. And if you can be a part of worship with kids and do that from the platform to help kids feel a part of that service, that is a win. And that's something that I would encourage you to do regardless of COVID. If you have kids in the audience, then having a time of worship that they feel a part of or catered to in a sense in that moment is huge. And most people are really excited about it. And what's really funny is kids are not the only one that's going to be doing those motions. You're going to look out and everybody's going to be, the mountain. So try to involve your worship team as well. And then the last thing that I think is really cool, if you can figure out a way to implement this in your environment, is having a weekly kids in the church moment. And that can involve people on site or even off site. Like maybe you could ask your pastor, could we get a kid every week to read a portion of the scriptures? It could be pre-recorded and let them read that week's passage. Or could we have a kid have a prayer in our service? It could be on screen. It could be, some pastors are okay with flexibility and the unknown. Some pastors, that terrifies them to have an unscripted moment. But that's where you could say, we could video our kid and get it just the way we wanted and let you see it ahead of time so that you could plan for that. Or maybe it's simply just a, hey, this is how kids are connecting this week in our church. Did you know we are sending cards this week to this nursing home? We hope you can be a part of it. Just a weekly bit that is, and when I say bit, like a minute, it doesn't even have to be a long, I wouldn't do anything more than 2 to 3 minutes long. But some way that when a kid is at home or they're sitting in that pew, that they're like, hey, this is my church. This is me. I'm a part of this. I have a place in this body. So those are just some quick tips on how to integrate children into the larger service. And I'm open if you have questions or thoughts. I'll add this too, since no one's asking any question. If you're still, how many of you all are still like doing any kind of digital content just for kids on a Sunday morning? Okay, that's great. I hope it's working. Keep it up. One thing that I have heard often is, and you've probably already jumped over these hurdles already because we're well into this, but if we're asking families to log into 2 or 3 different things simultaneously on a Sunday morning, you're going to lose people. So for instance, if your church is live streaming their service at the same time that you're offering a children's thing, that's a conflict and it's not going to go well. And I would say, even if you are creating digital content, I would still ask to be a part or to plan and help integrate kids in with the greater service, because not every parent is logging their kid in to watch your digital content, but they might actually sit down and watch the main live stream. And so their kid may be a part of that. So if there's a way that you can do both of those things or have parts of your team be a part of both of those things, I would fully lean into that as much as you can. Because one thing that you have to remind other people who aren't in children's ministry, you have to remind them of this a lot, that you're, for the most part, a lot of who you are shepherding require an adult to help them get that content if they're not there. So it's not like when your pastor sends an email, your 4-year-old is not opening that email and putting themselves online and seeing this stuff. So you have to think for those kids whose parents are not following all these great things that you're sending out, and help integrate that into the main service. That way, maybe you're going to catch some that aren't getting it on your individualized digital content.
It's good. Any questions, you guys? Maybe not. I thought that was gold, especially I'm just like blown away thinking like some of our churches, like it's possible a kid hasn't seen another kid in a service. Like, I don't know. That just is like kind of blowing my mind a little bit. Also my internet is telling me I'm super unstable. So I hope you guys can hear me. I can't even tell if you can't, but thank you, Leah. Really appreciate your wisdom there. And I took a ton of notes and I don't lead a kids ministry. So that was really good for me. This recording will go online if you guys miss some things or want to refer to it. So know that we'll put that on our Alliance Northwest YouTube's channel. Yeah. Leah, thank you.
Of course, my pleasure.
You guys, bless you as you're trying to sort this out. I know some of you are like in the middle of like, what is this going to look like? So please reach out if you need me to connect you with someone, or if you need to connect with one another. Let me know. I can help you. And yeah, Leah, thank you again.
You're welcome. And
Last
I'll throw this in
update,
here, too.
we go. My internet.
I will say this and I'll throw it in the chat as well. I am available. Well, I have availability in my calendar. When you start opening, if you have a need for some on-site training and you think that you could benefit from a visit, don't hesitate to reach out. If I have space in the calendar, there's no charge for me to come out and kind of help navigate some of those conversations or help train volunteers. So just know that that is a resource. That's what I'm here for, and that's my job.
Yeah. Thank you, Leah. That's a gift. An amazing gift. Just an update, we have Kidmin one-day trainings in March. I think they'll be in person. So we'll be emailing some more information about that. But you should already have the dates. This Portland area one is on March 13th, and the Seattle area is on March 20th. Those will be a free event that will not include a meal, so we'll excuse you to go get food, but it's going to be a whole, well, maybe not a full day, but it'll be a chunk in the morning and a chunk in the afternoon of training. So look for more information on that, save those dates, and if for some reason we can't do this in person, we'll just shift to online, but it kind of looks like we will be able to. We'll just be, socially distanced and masked, but it'll still be fun to see one another. So yeah. That's all my updates. We have a Kidmin Connect in 2 weeks, so embrace that time to just chat. Debbie on the last Kidmin Connect, I think it was Debbie. Debbie, was it you that talked about Easter? I can't remember. Someone, yeah, okay. Maybe you guys are thinking, what the heck are we going to be doing for Easter? And that can be something we talk about in 2 weeks. So if maybe you're already ahead of the game, but when she asked about that, I was like, oh my gosh, it was 10 months ago when we were all thinking, what are we doing for Easter? It was like the first thing, and it's here again, and we can do this together. So yeah, we can chat about that in 2 weeks if you'd like. So yeah, thank you guys. Bless you, Leah. Bless you too for your time and energy and investment that you have in kids ministry leaders around our whole nation. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Brian, bye everyone.
Bye.